Ideal for Gifted is celebrating National Parenting Gifted Children's Week. Our mission driven work focuses on three key areas: education, equity, and community. By nurturing the potential of the students in our care through advocacy and programming, Ideal is working daily to shape a virtual community of learning and belonging.
Welcome, Dr. Yvonne de St. Croix. De St. Croix? De St. Croix.
Either way, it depends on how close to Bastille Day we are. De St. Croix is fine. Thank you, Dr. Stewart. Nice to be here.
And you are the co-founder of Ideal for Gifted and our newly elected board president. You're an award-winning high-energy optimist who performs in the field of gifted education with talent specifically in high-performing, underrepresented diverse learners, creativity, global awareness, leadership, and curiosity. She holds a degree, her doctorate is in educational leadership from Concordia University, Portland, Oregon, a master's in secondary education from the University of South Carolina. Licenses include Talented and Gifted, Reading Specialist, 23 years of experience in Gifted and Talented Coordinator, Practitioner, Researcher, and Specialist.
Thank you for the compliment. I really appreciate it. It's been a career goal of mine to work with underrepresented, diverse populations of students, wherever they may be across the spectrum of services needed.
Well, also recently, NAGC Creativity Network Leader.
Yes, I've been hosting the Creativity Night for our national conference for several years now. And recently I've become the network lead. My next steps in that are seeing how creativity is working its way into identification, either formally or informally across our states. And I'm doing that in tangent with different affiliates across the state that are in gifted education.
Cool.
Thanks.
Well, today we're going to talk about innovation in education and also individualization. And I've got some questions that may seem like a keen sense of the obvious, but not necessarily for our parents who are our audience.
Thank you.
So what do you mean when you say individualization?
When I'm looking at individualization for students, I'm really looking at where the student is in terms of their readiness for learning, where the student is in terms of their interest in what they're learning, and also where they are in terms of their modalities of learning, the styles in which they learn best. Those are what I'm initially looking at. Then from those three components, I like to look at how the output that is shared by a student is modified based on content, product, or process that as led either by a formal setting, like a formal educational setting, or either in the zeitgeist of the student's peripheral activities. So for example, if I'm in a classroom and I have a student that has a higher level of readiness in a topic, I would want to pre-assess that student to see where their zone of proximal development is and do the next activity according to that. From there, I would like to say, like, okay, let's look at the dimensional ways that a student can represent who they are with their own self and where they can grow their own self. What gives them the most chances and opportunities for growth, but also what are some areas that a student, not necessarily is a weakness, but is a consideration that they haven't gone into in looking to grow their own individual passions.
Got it. Well, back in the 1960s and 70s, individualization was this big buzzword, but it fizzled out because people thought that what that meant was that, you've got 27 kids in the class and you've got to have every single one of them have a different assignment or a different challenge. But that's not feasible. So how do you do this such that it is feasible?
One consideration is looking at appropriately challenging learning opportunities for students within the regular learning environment originally. So within a regular learning environment, you would know that they are appropriately challenging for students based on pre-assessments that you would give on any given topic. And then you would look at ancillary data. What's the
Mm,
student's background in that topic, and what's their learning proclivities in this topic? This
mm,
allows you as an educator to maybe group students with like styles of learning. It
uh,
allows you to group students with like product outputs. It also
mm,
allows you to consider the readiness of the student, because that's going to tell you what your next step in the learning progression is that's necessary for that student.
oh, cool. There's um, the other I word that we're kind of talking about today is innovation. Why
Mhm.
would you say that innovation is needed in education?
There's never really been a time that innovation has not been necessary in in education, but there is this space in between looking at how innovation is assessed in the educational structure
Mhm,
and outside of the educational structure. Um, Within an educational structure, there are frequently standards that are needed to be assessed. If you're
mhm,
in a situation where you're in a learning environment that's looking at the standards, then you might know that if a student has met those standards, that innovation is the next logical step, because
mhm.
they're going to want to move forward from those basic standards into um, authentic, original, and creative output, because this is where you're going to have a strong generation of not only the ideas that are come up from, but the originality of those ideas.
Mm.
These ideas become self-empowering springboards for student learners. And this is a reason why you need innovation. It can occur anywhere in a student's learning continuum, but if it is nurtured and supported by the learning environment, then that's going to be supporting that student's social emotional well-being, as well as looking at terms of creativity, imagination, and exploration as part of innovation.
So would some students benefit more from innovation than others?
I think that every student has the opportunity to be innovative if that opportunity is given. And I
Mm,
think innovation is again based on where the student is at. Not all students, not all students learn at the same rate, and not all learners express that learning in the same modality.
mhm,
So when you're looking at a student's, say, baseline assessment of an activity, the
mhm.
innovation comes from the growth in that learning, the zone of proximal development that a student is engaged in through that process of innovative discovery. Um, a simple way to see if your student is working towards innovation is after a pre-assessment. Ask the next series of questions are of what, ask the student after that pre-administration of the assessment, what the next steps would be. What do they see as the next logical steps? This would allow you to
Oh,
gauge where the student is in terms of their level of innovation understanding. Because from
mhm.
that, you can see what the commonalities of the whole class, a small group are, and modify accordingly. This way allows you to have validation of independent thought, but also at the
Mm.
same time, collaborative communities of thoughts that lead to higher output of innovation.
So we're here, two educators talking sort of education ease, and our audience is not necessarily educators. They're probably a lot of parents because this is an event for parents. You think
Mhm.
you could sort of translate what you just said into regular English?
I definitely can do that. As someone who frequently meets with parents, I think that it's a great situation to ask your students what they're interested in. I think it's
Mm,
also a great idea to ask their students what they want to be interested in, but aren't really comfortable with the full range of knowledge in. That allows you as a parent to know what's in the student's wheelhouse and what the student wants to be in their wheelhouse. This gives you
mm,
two areas that you can start working with your students on these innovative tactics. The way that you do this is you look at where the student's coming from, and maybe you support, like, say you've got a student that's really mathematically precocious, and
mm,
you're working forward with sequential mathematical problems. As you kind of see here on the board, we've got a development sum. That would be an example of a student who had a readiness, and they were learning in that proclivity, that interesting way. But if you're a parent who like maybe wants to get their kid interested in a different activity that's outside of their wheelhouse,
mm,
a good way to do that is to pre-assess where the student is. So ask them a little bit of questions about it. What have you done in this topic before? What have you researched in this area? Where do you want to go with this?
mhm,
And that allows for a lot of starts. One way to really bring in the innovation as a parent is to look for authentic ways for that innovation to be shared within the community. So, for example, if there are opportunities for a student to participate in like a reading competition or an art competition or an engineering opportunity, go for it, because then you've got an authentic end goal. You've got that
mm.
innovation at the beginning, you've got an authentic product at the end, and in between, you're doing the process that's developing the student's mind.
Awesome. That I think I can understand that as a parent.
Okay. Yeah, think about it, parents, as like you're pulling some taffy. And one side, you got this kind of foundation. This other side, you've got this end foundation. Here's the beginning. This is where you're going for. You don't want that taffy to break. You want that continuum of learning to reach that final process, because that's going to grow your student in both their confidence and their ability to have a strong innovation background, because this will be knowledge that is not applied knowledge. This is knowledge that's gained knowledge. This is more synthesis of process and knowledge.
So several parents have said to me over the time that their regular public school isn't doing this kind of thing.
Mhm.
Do you have a sense as to why that is, and maybe what parents could do at home?
Well, to answer your first part of the question, it depends on the educational structure that the student is a part of,
Mm,
and what the goals of that educational structure are for that individual district, school,
mm,
or learning community they're a part of. So
mhm,
initially, as a parent, you would want to see syllabi or course instruction so you could see what the learning standards are for that continuum. That would allow you to see like where the student is falling. If you have a situation where the student is, say, eh, placed based on age versus aptitude in a topic.
mm,
So this is one reason that um, parents don't always modify or sorry, schools don't always modify for
mm,
the needs of the students. In situations like this, the parents do have the ability to step in a myriad of ways. One of the ways that they can step in is by asking for that course information and seeing where the student is and asking what pre-assessments are being done of that activity. You can also ask, most curriculums offer extension activities. So if you've
mm,
got a particular accepted learning program that's recognized at your school, you can see if there's extension and enrichment activities related to that curriculum at that school. There's also sites like Ed Reports, where you would be able to evaluate what sort of structure the curriculum had. And that way you would know what the innovations aspects are.
cool.
Um, yeah, schools have a variety of reasons for offering the educational programs they do. Some
Mm,
states require districts to choose one of, say, 5 literacy programs for K-5 literacy. If you're in a situation like that, then that's the program that has been state mandated. in that situation, as a parent, you would want to know, where does my student fall on this continuum of standards? And
Mm.
what are the areas that I can support to accelerate my students' learning? Now, if you're looking for sustainability in program decisions like that, within the
Mhm.
regular educational classroom, you could have the teacher differentiate, again, based on readiness, interest, and learning proclivities. Personally, I think the easiest way is learning proclivities. In this situation, you would assess what the students' learning proclivities are, maybe based on like a survey, and kind of group the students accordingly and see what is the right fit for students. This might be like, maybe you've got a student that's more visual than verbal. If you know that,
Mm.
you're going to know what sort of output to expect from the students and what you can put on like a choice menu of activities. That's a way that you could work it into the classroom. If you're working it into like a school structure, you can ask what sort of clubs and activities are being sponsored by the school. And you
Mhm.
can propose different clubs and activities to be sponsored by the school. And then that way, they could consider those in the annual budgetary reviews for
Mm.
for the school sites themselves. There's also district policies that you can modify that would look like, if I was wanting to say, like, in many of our states, there are, from the state level, grants that districts can apply for different
Oh.
enrichment and extension activities.
Hmm.
Those opportunities frequently are posted on the state websites, but again, your gifted, your local gifted resource team, which is based on your state affiliate, they would have knowledge of those. And Davidson Institute offers a good listing of those as well.
So when you say state affiliate, can you elaborate on how parents would find their state affiliate? State affiliate of what?
Ah, so if you were looking for your state affiliate is probably listed under NAGC, the National Association for Gifted Children. You could go to the different state affiliates and you could look at, hey, does Arizona, does Colorado, does Texas, do we have an affiliate that's a common source for information regarding gifted? If so, that could be an access point. A secondary resource you could look at is on the Davidson Institute website. You could look for your state and see if funding is provided for gifted education, or if
Mm.
there's a mandate to identify gifted populations or a mandate
Mhm.
to serve. In situations where there's not a funding mandate, there's ways to work around that for gifted populations, such as differentiation within the regular education classroom based on readiness, interest, and learning style, and then you modify based on product, process, and content.
Cool. I didn't
Thank
know
you.
about those. I didn't know about the scholarship things or the grants that might be
Yes,
available. That's
yes. I know that, I'm based in Connecticut and
mhm.
I work with our current board of like our lead for education. Her name's Charlene Russell Taylor, and she has out, like, we just got our summer listing of what options are listed out there. Again,
Wow.
it kind of determines on um, where you're looking and who you have
Mhm.
to ask. Not all
Mm.
states have a designated individual for gifted education to ask within their state.
Right.
Sometimes it's under special education, sometimes there's a targeted person, and somebody there, it's just a district by district situation. This is also, I'm just talking in this situation regarding public school. Private schools do have consortiums. And so like most of ours in this region are through the New England Consortium for independent schools. So you would
Mhm.
look there at who their key people are for that. You can also, as a parent, ask what sort of gifted training the teachers have had. Some of our smaller districts in Connecticut had all of their staff do differentiation training and offer that on an ongoing basis. And so in that way, while there's not a designated gifted program, there's an
Mhm.
expectation of differentiation for high performing learners. So, so all students have their needs met.
Mm. That sounds really good. Um, what if you're really still, even with the differentiation, the child is just not getting their educational needs met?
It's a responsibility of the educational system to meet the needs of each and every individual student.
Mm.
In that situation, I would this is when I would call in the data that regarded the student, and I would look
Mhm.
at the summative and formative data that was provided by the student and discuss initially with the teacher or educational team what opportunities were provided. This is a
Mm.
very good situation as well to find other like-minded parents of
Ah.
students who have high learning proclivities, because in this way you can find your community. Sometimes,
Mm.
sometimes, I work so frequently with gifted education students, and one of the things that I've noticed about like my K-12 students is there's a desire to be alone together. So you're so you're introverted, but you want to be with your other introverts as a high performing students. So
Mhm.
this can be the true of parents as well sometimes. So
Ah.
by building a community of like-minded parents that are
Mhm.
recognizing, hey, there's an additional need for my student here, that is where um, that togetherness brings a greater
Mm.
voice in a school setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
for
any
gifted and talent. Yeah, sorry.
no, 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 it's okay. Um, any last words of wisdom before we go to the audience's questions?
Sure. I think that it's important when you make choices regarding high performing students to think about them in terms of scalability, replicability, and sustainability. And I think those three elements should be part of your plan when you're looking at programming for gifted students and what opportunities you can bring to them. Because if you can set up a foundation for an expectation for high performing students, it's harder to remove it from that structure that exists in the educational context.
Cool. So first question, what do you mean by summative and formative assessment?
Thank you for the question. A summative assessment is a test that a student takes at one point in time that gives one score. And it tends to be something that will place a student at a certain learning level. A formative test is a test that the student builds upon. It might be something that they've taken it the first time and they've gotten an 85, the next time a 90% proficiency, and the third time a 95% proficiency. Formative assessments, I feel, work best when you're looking also at the standards that are needing to be met, because that way you can see a student's actual learning progression. And
Mhm.
there are examples online of standards-based report cards that you might want to check out as a parent just to see where the spectrum of those fall. You will definitely, in each state in our nation, we have standards-based grading occurring in different structures. So it would be worthwhile to look into those. So formative is over time, summative is in one sitting.
Cool. Next parent question. What role do I, as a parent, play in developing and implementing my child's individualized instruction?
As a parent, what you're looking for is you're looking for what is my student precocious in, and how can I nurture those precocious activities? That's your first step, because that's where you're going to build the closest relationship. That's a trusting relationship to your student, because you're showing them that you support their interest and readiness where they are at.
Mm.
From there, as a parent, if you build a trusting relationship with the student and you've shown investment in their interest, there are going to be activities that you can suggest as the student gets older that are new and novel to the student, that if they trust you and they know that you trust them,
Mm.
then they're going to have a greater desire to try activities they've never tried before. For example, say you've got a kid who loves Scratch and they're totally into coding and they're doing a great job at it. And then in their downtime, they want to do Scratch, but maybe you want to move into something a little bit more difficult, like coding robotics. So we're going
Mm.
to take this branch and we're going from Scratch, which is screen-based, to something that's application-based, okay?
Ah,
So in this
mhm,
situation, if you've already said, like, hey, I bought into you doing the coding that's on screen, let's move into robotics, then you're going to have a relationship that allows for that sense of like, I have a parachute towards my learning. Like, I'm going to be okay. People care
mhm,
about me as a learner. So as a parent,
mhm,
that's what you want. It's not necessarily what the parent wants for the outcome of the student to be. Let the student in some way guide where the student wants that learning to take, at least
mhm.
in part, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you want a student to be nurtured in mathematics. You want a student to be know the value of literacy. These are key elements for life.
Mhm,
There's extraneous activities that a student is interested in. That's the tempo of innovation. And that's where the
mhm.
creativity really lies for the student. So if you can nurture that at a foundational young age, that student is not going to be as apt to hit a wall of perfection when they get into their teen years. They're going to
Mm,
have more flexibility in their thinking because of the way that you've supported and nurtured them as a parent.
that's great, a great tip.
Thank you.
So, um, let's see, we've covered a couple of these already that are coming in. Um, in what ways is this particular program innovative?
The one that I'm a part of now?
No, I think the one that they mean like ideal.
Oh, Ideal is wonderfully innovative. So the way that Ideal is innovative is it really works to nurture the individual needs of each student based on their readiness, interest, and learning proclivities. Students come to us with a full spectrum of creative ideas. And because they come to us with that full spectrum, we take that rainbow in. Like, we're going to take the student and let their joyful ideas shine. One way that we really let it shine, I feel, is from we have these projects that we do as our output. And so these are like student showcases where the parents and community can really see the authentic learning that the students are doing. I personally also like our leadership groups, which give the
Mm,
students a great deal of autonomy to designing courses or
mm,
activities or other elements of the program. And that creates a community of buy-in. So that's
mm,
very beneficial. I also like the way that a student is judged uh, and their readiness versus their age. That really works for
yeah,
me too, because if I've got a student that's high performing in literacy and I've already pre-assessed that they're high performing in literacy, I'm ready for them to move on to that next complexity of writing tasks that they're working
yeah.
on.
We've mentioned several times pre-assessment. Um, can you there's so many different ways to do that, and some of them, they sound really official, but they might be very doable by a parent.
Mhm.
Can you give us sort of a layman's definition of what is a pre-assessment and maybe a couple examples?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that would be fantastic. So so one of the things you can do is you can ask the students questions initially by saying, like, oh, what, like, what are you interested in? Like one of the things you can utilize is if you have like a piece of text that you're interested in or something
Mm,
common that you're interested in that maybe the student has heard of but hasn't heard a lot about, is you can ask the students what they know about it. And by asking them, they may know they'll share with you what they know. Personally, I like drawings of different things. I very much like
Mhm.
visual modalities and spatial modalities represented. So as a parent for a pre-assessment, you could have a student draw out like their design for how they want their room to look. And that would allow you
Oh,
to look at like spatial modalities. That's a way that you're able to see like scale, and it allows you to
mm,
understand like mathematic proclivities in that
hmm,
situation. It
mhm.
also allows you to see how a student organizes their thoughts. That's part of that
Oh,
pre-assessment
yeah.
process, is you want to see like, in what ways is my student expressing themselves?
Mm,
Uh, I I tend to always like to do, as I mentioned before, the multiple modality surveys, both as an adult and a student, because I think it's really interesting how middle school students all turn kinesthetic. So there's like I love watching that, and by that, parents, what I mean is like, you, if you wanted to, you could have the students every year take like a learning assessment and just see what they turned up as, and it's really fun. It's kind of like the fortune cookie of a student. You're just kind of figuring out like, what are they going to be fortunate in, with this particular year with things. Um, Pre-assessments require listening more than actively giving a student a task. Um,
mm,
there's not a huge need to go through um, a wide array of very similar, say, math problems if a
mhm,
student is already pre-assessed with understanding what they are. So like, say I'm doing like complex multiplication, I might have
mhm,
the student initially do like 7 problems, and then I might, like, on another day, hey, let's get back to this, and we're going to do like 5 problems or 3 problems, and you can
mm,
kind of whittle it down to the next activity. Or the opposite of that, you can have them do like 1 problem and then ask them about the application of that, and then increase it by taking them to the grocery store and let's go shopping, like, let's look at the difference. What are the price per poundage, what's like, the prices that we're going with. There are When you're talking about pre-assessments for students, and you're also talking about engagement as a parent. And
yes.
so if you ask authentic questions, uh, you're probably going to get a more intense answer than fine. If you ask how their day might be fine. But if you ask about a specific topic that is of interest to the student, they might
Ah,
run with it.
got it.
So that's some ways to look at pre-assessment.
Yeah, so then you get kind of a baseline
A
or kind of
baseline and a
a
gauge.
floor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like filling up a water gauge, if you will. Like, once it gets towards the top, it's time to get a different gauge. It's time to
The
move
bigger
on.
gun.
Yes.
So, let's see. You did that one. Let's see. Oh, what would you recommend for individualization when you have a child who's really way out there? Like the professionals might call him profoundly gifted or
Mhm.
exceptionally gifted. What what can we as parents do to keep them interested in learning and help them be happy?
Hmm. It depends on the content of what they're studying,
Mm,
but a good way to support those students is to look for authentic outputs that the
mm,
student can reach,
mhm,
because otherwise you might find yourself giving a student, say, like a math book at a higher level. Like you
mhm,
might end up giving like a third grader or a seventh grade math book and expecting them to do all the word problems. And I don't know really if in life, when you're dealing with innovation, that's what your ultimate goal is. You're looking more at like the application of that learning. So a good way for a parent to nurture that would be to look for authentic opportunities to have that higher level thinking expressed
mm,
through the product That
Mhm.
was, and then because once you find what the product is, there are going to be questions that come up about the content and, like what curricula is being used.
Mhm.
So you don't necessarily, like, there's not a huge need to put adult topics first. There's a
Ah,
lot of time for these high performing, super strong learners to think innovatively and creatively. You want them to have opportunities for boredom to be purposeful. Like
ooh.
there's a difference between being bored in a classroom setting
Mhm.
that you're not being appropriately challenged in, and
Mhm.
being bored because you have the time to be creative with the materials that are in front of you.
Mm.
There's this, like, for the higher performing students, you want them to have an opportunity to think about what they're interested in, and then think about, these are the materials that I have. How can I express that interest using these materials that I have? Because that increases divergent thinking. And when you have the divergent thinking, that's going to strengthen your, especially your super high performing students with their
Mm.
innovation and creativity. You want dexterity. You want the student's mindset to be flexible enough that when they haven't seen something before, it's no big deal,
Mm.
because they're going to learn to the next level, and then they're going to ask questions to move to that next level. So
Cool.
those are some of the things that
Yeah.
I think having an authentic purpose really
Mhm.
supports our higher performing students.
Yeah. So one of the things that parents ask this question, and I saved it for last because it's one that I get a lot.
Mhm.
Um, if you're really individualized, the would that make the high performing students feel isolated? And if so, then how do you achieve like what you mentioned earlier, sort of like each doing their own thing together?
Mhm, mhm. So
If you're a
thanks
parent,
for saying,
how do
yes,
you
thank you
balance
for
that?
sharing that. Yeah, I was thinking of, that's exactly what I was thinking of when you asked the question. Because you basically just want to be in isolation together. And so the easiest way to do it is to find other like-minded students
Mm,
or like-minded learning communities. You may be, say, someone who's a student that has other students interested in that same topic, and you
ah,
want them to have, a broad spectrum of understanding. And so maybe they're with other students that have a similar interest in a similar topic. Um, this is not the only thing. If you are, say you're a very young student and you're interested in astronomy, maybe you
mm,
want to find out where your local group for astronomy is, and then you are meeting with them and you're seeing, like, oh, okay, this is a multi-generational curiosity that I'm exposed
mm,
to right now. This is not such a bad thing if the topic is supporting the student's interest, well-being, socialization. Um, I know that, like, I tried to guide my student towards topics that I think will be useful to him in life, in
mm.
terms of going through a world with strong manners, and also strong, like, flexible mindset. And so this is the diversity and range of opportunities that you provide to a student. There's a definite push, for a social group to be
Mm,
achieved. Or maybe as a parent, you feel a need to blend with the other parents that are around
mm.
your community. In
Yeah.
those situations, feel free to blend with those other parents, but have another group of parents too that is in tune to how you are as a parent, and how your student is as a learner. And those networks can be found like through local affiliates, through regional groups, community centers, libraries, or other great resources for those.
Well, thank you so much for all of your insight and knowledge and ideas. I think the parents will be doing well to follow some of those. And this is the first in a series of webinars that we're giving. And the name of the program is Ideal. And the first one is all about the I, which is what you and I just did. And
Thank
then
you.
we've got the next night will be D for differentiation in more specifics with the world famous person, Carol Ann Tomlinson. And then we have E for enrichment with Professor Jan Lapine. And A is the administrative leader for the Acceleration Institute, Anne Lukowski-Shoplik. And then a nice wrap up will be all about learning for our kinds of students with Dr. Sally Reese, who is also world famous. So this should be a really great set, and I really appreciate the kickoff of this particular conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's such a joy being here and being with you, parents. Thank you all for your questions, and I look forward to your comments later. It's a great time to be with you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.